I'm Patrick. I like books and stuff, and today I'm going to talk to you about the beginnings of literature, reconciling ourselves with mortality, and why you should definitely see a doctor if you've had an erection lasting longer than 6 days. I'll get to that last one in a minute. I've been meaning to start making educational videos about literature for a while, and I thought, what better place to start than the very beginning of literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Sumerian epic poem that dates from around the 18th century BC. To give some perspective, that's about 1,000 years before the Iliad and the Odyssey were written down, and 1,900 years before non-papyrus-based paper was invented. That's old as shit, guys. The epic was discovered on stone tablets written in a language called Akkadian and using a writing system called cuneiform. The story of Gilgamesh was most likely a combination of other oral stories that were finally written down and cobbled together into one epic. Unfortunately, the sources we have for this epic are not that great, and a lot of the tablets we have are very poorly preserved, with some lines even cutting off mid-sentence, but we can use our context clues and our knowledge about ancient Sumerian languages to, figure it out. And now, to the plot! The story takes place in and around the ancient city of Uruk, and the poem begins with a lengthy description of its mighty walls and temples. After this, we meet Uruk's king, Gilgamesh. Hey, wait a minute. The book's called Gilgamesh! He's not a very nice king, though. He abuses his people, he exhausts them through forced labor and athletic contests, and he constantly asserts his right to take the new brides of the kingdom and sleep with them on their wedding night. This was a surprisingly common practice back in the day. It's just the sort of thing that would happen if Donald Trump was running the country. Insert topical gag. The people are so fed up that they pray to the gods to send somebody to defeat Gilgamesh and match him in power, which the gods do by creating a wild man named Enkidu. When Enkidu is created, he's not too versed in human interactions, so he spends his early days wandering around with the animals and harassing the people's livestock and such. The people decide to tame Enkidu by sending him a bride, the temple prostitute Shmoop. Temples had prostitutes back then. It's a long story. They meet, and I guess it's love at first sight because, and this was the part I was talking about earlier, she did for the man the work of a woman. His passion caressed and embraced her. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu was erect as he coupled with Shmoop. Dude had a boner that lasted for 6 days. Jesus! They get tired after a couple hours and have to take a break, but no, Enkidu just keeps on porking. Anyway, after Shmoop has civilized Enkidu, if you know what I mean, he has his first encounter with Gilgamesh. The two wrestle until Enkidu takes over Gilgamesh, but instead of being pissed off, Gilgamesh is like, hey, this guy's cool, I want to become his best friend. OTP for life, am I right, guys? Gilgamesh and Enkidu go on all sorts of wild adventures together, chief among which is killing the giant ogre Humbaba and destroying his cedar forests. But things turn more sour when the goddess Ishtar takes a real liking to Gilgamesh and asks him to sleep with her. When he refuses, she asks the gods to send a giant bull to terrorize and punish Gilgamesh, which, if you haven't guessed, Gilgamesh and Enkidu team up and kill. Because that's what friends do, right? But agreeing that the friends must be punished for their misdeeds, the gods curse Enkidu and he dies a horrible, sickly death. You can imagine Gilgamesh is absolutely beside himself for grief. He wanders in the desert wearing animal skin, mourning for his friend and tearing out his hair, and he decides that he must go on an epic quest to discover the secret of eternal life. He decides to seek out Utnapishtim and his wife, the only two people to be granted immortality by the gods. After many hardships, he finally gets to the river of death that separates this world from the other world, and he's ferried across it, and he meets Utnapishtim at the other side. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that the search for eternal life is fleeting, and that if we're going to die, we might as well accept it. But alas, Gilgamesh is determined, and after much begging and pleading, Utnapishtim's wife tells him that there's a prickly plant that lives at the bottom of the ocean that, if consumed, contains the secret to eternal life. After much difficulty in securing the plant, Gilgamesh finally washes up on shore, but he's too exhausted to do anything, so he just passes out. Then, as luck would have it, a snake happens to pass by, sees the plant, gets hungry, eats it, and then leaves. Oh shit. Gilgamesh, obviously greatly disappointed, returns home, and the story ends with him describing the walls of Uruk, just like the beginning. To the analysis! Gilgamesh is the very first mythological text that we know of, and we can tell from the story that this text influenced later mythological traditions. For example, the river of death that Gilgamesh has to cross echoes the river Styx in later Greek and Roman mythological traditions. And the reason Utnapishtim was granted eternal life by the gods is that one time the gods decided to send a giant flood to destroy humanity, but saved Utnapishtim and his family so long as he gathered all the seeds of the living plants onto a boat so they'd be spared from the flood. Yeah, you can kind of see where this is going. But other than the sociological aspect, there are two major themes in this poem. One, the ineffability of death and mortality, and two, the power of connection and love. Let's start with love. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for the most part, focuses on the extremes of our humanity, and how our interaction with other people can help soften and reshape those extremes. For example, Enkidu is an animalistic wild man until he learns about human interaction and sexuality and love from Shamhat. I still can't get over it. 6 days, people! And Gilgamesh is an unrestrained tyrant who is unable to feel compassion until he finds compassion in his first and only friend, Enkidu. Some commentators even argue that Gilgamesh and Enkidu are literature's first same-sex couple, sharing a relationship similar to Achilles and Patroclus in Homer's Iliad. But that's another video. Bear in mind that this story was first composed at a time when humans were starting to move from farm areas to build cities. And learning to cooperate and love others wasn't just a method of self-improvement, it was necessary for survival. I mean, you can't run a city when everyone goes around killing each other all the time. The second theme is a bit more grim and a bit more obvious. Death. You are gonna die. There's no way around it, and I think it's fitting that the very beginnings of literature begins with an analysis of a question that I think is the first question that humans ever had to answer by themselves. Oh my god, death is a thing. What am I gonna do? Death is intricately woven into our existence, and as humans we're dealt a pretty shitty lot as far as the forces of nature and fate goes. The biggest example of this in Gilgamesh is the famous account of the flood, which the gods send because... Nope. No reason. Just wanted to send a flood, I guess. And we all have those days, don't we? So yeah, the gods were just vaguely pissed off at mankind, so they decided to fuck everyone's shit up. What assholes. And because of this, people die. Even people who don't deserve to die, like Enkidu. So when the snake eats Gilgamesh's plant, he is understandably devastated. I mean, how is he going to cope with being trapped in this endless cycle of death, with no way of escaping? And then, something kind of incredible happens. When Gilgamesh is being escorted back home by the ferryman on the River of Death, he sees the walls of Uruk in the distance, and describes him by repeating the same exact lines of verse that open the poem. O Ur-Shanabi, climb Uruk's walls and walk back and forth. Survey its foundations, examine its brickwork. Were not its bricks fired in an oven? Did the 7 sages not lay its foundations? A square mile is a city, a square mile date grove. A square mile is a clay pit. Half the square mile is the temple of Ishtar. 3 square miles and a half is Uruk's expense. Thus ends the poem. It seems that Gilgamesh found a way to face mortality after all. He may pass away, but his contributions will still be there. Humans may die and pass on, but the ideas we create, the things we make, and the footprints we leave, our humanity is immortal. What do you guys think? Do you guys have a different interpretation of the Epic of Gilgamesh? Please comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm Patrick. I would love to make some more videos for you soon. So, see you next time.